Welcome to tonight's live stream. I'm going to get started in a minute. Just want to let everybody know that the stream is getting ready to start. Excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me. One moment. Just. What's going on, Sean S? I'm going to get into tonight's topic in a minute. But before I get into tonight's topic, I want everybody to know my newest book, Easting Blast from the Past album, is available in paperback. This is the wrong edition. I'm sorry. But it's available in paperback today, and you can pick up a copy on Amazon.com. Excuse me, and Eternal Night is also available on Amazon.com as well. So both of these are available on Amazon, so I would really appreciate if you pick one up. Excuse me, during the show. Sorry, I have a little bit of a cold, so but I still want to do this topic because this topic is one that really is important to me. Now, I was deeply disappointed at the behavior of Black people in the aftermath of the 2020 election. And I was really disappointed because although what I saw was a display that just showed how far we have to go as related to making progress as a race and towards the road of Black empowerment. Thank you, Gordon Freeman, for the super chat. I will still continue to persevere. But I was deeply disappointed because what I saw with the 2020 election and all of the celebrations as related to it showed me how we really have a lot of Black people who are codependent on white supremacy. Now, codependency, the definition of it, is excessive emotional or psychological reliance on a partner, typically one who requires support on account of an illness or addiction. That is the excuse me, definition of codependency. And when I saw all of these Black people out here on last Saturday, hooping, hollering, and celebrating over the election of Joe Biden, I began to understand how codependent some Black people are on the institution of white supremacy. So you have all of these Black people out here they're hooping, hollering, and celebrating the election, excuse me, of your Joe Biden and believing they've accomplished something. But what you're seeing is not the healthy behavior of a functional individual. What you're seeing is the reactions of Black people who have an excessive emotional and psychological reliance on the institution of white supremacy. And what these Black people don't know is they are trying to support somebody who has an addiction, and the people who have an addiction to are the white supremacists. The white supremacist has an illness and an addiction, and they are addicted to holding on to the lie that they have superior power to everybody else and that they are in a superior position above everyone else. That's the delusion that the white supremacist has. And many Black people, what they want to do is continue to enable that dysfunctional idea in the white supremacist mind because they depend on this white supremacist to be able to take care of their needs. That's the belief that they have been taught over the last 500 years, and they want to keep that delusion in place. So that's what I observed when I saw all of these Black people out here getting into the streets during a pandemic where we had all of these people not social distancing, not making any sort of thing as related to their own health or their own safety. They were out here celebrating a election of a man who basically was somebody trying to oppress them and has created policy over the last 47 years to further oppress Black people. And they were acting like this was some sort of accomplishment. And many people don't see how this was just them expressing their dysfunction because only a codependent individual would go out here and celebrate the election of somebody who has abused them for over 47 years with policies like the whole discrepancy between crack cocaine and powder cocaine, the 1994 crime bill, and the three strikes and you're outlaw. Why are you out here celebrating the election of a man who created policies that were specifically designed to oppress you? That's a critical question you would ask objectively about some of these Black people who are out here hooping, hollering, and celebrating over the election of Joe Biden if you had an objective frame of thinking. But many of these Black people, they were sitting there not understanding that you doing this just shows that there is some serious mental health issues in the Black community and that there's some serious mental health issues that need to be addressed in the Black community as we start heading down the road to Black empowerment. Because the only way to move forward down the road towards Black empowerment is to acknowledge this codependent relationship that many Blacks have on the institution of white supremacy and how this codependency is really preventing Black people, and I would say many white people, from actualizing their potential. Because in a codependent relationship, both partners oftentimes suffer, and they suffer because when you have codependent people, you create a paradigm that is always destined to fail. And the reason why the codependent paradigm is always destined to fail is because you have two individuals in that paradigm. One is the victim, and the other is the abuser. Now, the Black people, as I see it, they are in the position of the victim, and the white supremacist is in the position of the abuser. And oftentimes, when you have a codependent relationship, what will happen is the abuser will continue to project all of their failures and shortcomings on the victim. And when things don't go right in their life, they will always continue to blame the victim for all of their problems. And the victim, feeling guilty, will think that everything that's going wrong is their fault and try to help the abuser. And then when things fail, the help they're trying to give them fails, they want to point the finger at the abuser. And what happens is that it becomes a vicious circle, and it becomes a circle where people just keep pointing the finger at each other, and nobody really grows and nobody really changes. And that was evident to me when I started to see this cycle start to emerge with the election of your Barack Obama. Now, your Barack Obama's election was supposed to be the starting point of so-called change, but the great irony is we saw that it was the real start of us really starting to see this codependent cycle really start to happen, because we had all of these Black people again out here whooping and hollering and celebrating, talking about change. But we saw over the course of 8 years, we really did not get any sort of change whatsoever for Black people. Black people did not receive any sort of tangibles from the Obama administration, even though they voted 90 some odd percent in 2008 and 90 some odd percent again in 2012. And you had many Black people who were just sitting there believing they were going to get change, even though they saw a series of progressive events like the murder of Trayvon Martin by George Zimmerman, and the fact that the Attorney General, Eric Holder, did nothing to protect Black people's civil rights. They saw that nothing was changing, but they still wanted to believe in Barack Obama until they started to see that over a series of other Black men losing their lives, your Michael Brown, your Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, Eric Garner, and many other Black men, and even some Black women like Sandra Bland, people became disillusioned about your Barack Obama. But what happened was they started to walk away from it, because that was the whole process of the abuse, is that people start to walk away from the abuser until the abuser then comes back and makes an offer. But we started to see people starting to walk away from Barack Obama, and we started to see the codependent relationship starting to break up a little bit. And then the Trump presidency came along, and that a lot of people would say your Donald Trump is a racist and a bigot. But what your Donald Trump was giving Black people was an opportunity to break away from the codependent relationship they were having with one side of this whole abusive system of white supremacy. So what your Donald Trump was doing, he may have been, a big time jerk, but he told you the truth, and the truth was something that helped people develop the emotional pain in order to make some serious growth and be able to say, we cannot rely on this system. We cannot rely on this process. And we have to start making efforts to be able to empower ourselves, because the current system is not giving us what we need. And we cannot trust these individuals to provide for our needs. But many Black people, what they wanted to do, they were forced to do this because of the Trump presidency. It really forced Black people to start taking a look at their own lives, taking a look at their own communities, and starting to take a look at how few tangibles they were getting from their government. And this was painful for a lot of people starting in 2016. But the thing is that people didn't understand is pain is a good thing, because pain leads to growth, and growth leads to change. That was the great irony of the Trump presidency, was it was leading to Black people starting to actually make real change, the thing that was promised to them in 2008, they realized that in order to make change, they had to go through pain. And that pain was leading to, again, progress for Black people because we saw more Black people starting to talk about things like tangibles. They started talking about the seriousness of the political process. And we started to see Black people taking constructive action on their own. And those were good things. But the whole thing is that they wanted to get Black people back on the hamster wheel and back on the codependent relationship. So we had that was the most disappointing thing about the whole 2020 election is we had all of these Black people who they had an opportunity to take power, and it seemed like they were listening to the voices of new Black media like Jason Black, Professor Black Truth, your David Carrolls, your Mad Voodoo Mans. They were listening to people talking about tangibles, talking about taking the power of their own. And it seemed like people were listening to these things. And it seemed like they were going to do something constructive with this election. But what was really troubling was when the election came, we saw that all of that knowledge went in one ear and out the other of most Black people. And it seemed like most of that information they didn't really process the whole concept as related to tangibles and getting something in exchange for their vote. It seemed like when you look at the polls, we had the highest election turnout ever, and especially with Black populations. We had 80% of Black men voting for Joe Biden. We had 87% of Black women voting for Joe Biden. And it seemed like all that information that was given to them about tangibles went in one ear and out the other. And the celebrations we saw of these Black people going out here, celebrating this showed that it's like they didn't really learn anything about in those 12 years that have passed about trying to take yourself to the next level and take the Black community to the next level. And what was even sadder was it seemed like a lot of Black people wanted to take that step right back to the way things were back in 2008. And that really reminded me a lot of the codependence relationship that a battered wife has with her abusive husband. What happens is that the battered wife, they will take her to the shelter. They will tell her about the man being not good for her, the man abusing her, the man being violent towards her, the man mistreating her, and they will give her the tools to go out here and leave that man. And then one day the dude will come back with a dozen roses and a box of candy and talk about how he wants to change. And all of a sudden, all that knowledge that that woman got about empowerment goes out the window, and she's out back at that home with that man. Thank you, Marcus Frazier, for the super chat. He says showing support not only for your societal knowledge, but your love for creating comics. Thank you very much for the support. Because I am making a comic in the newest Easting book, Blast from the Past, and you can see that comic in the next Easting series book when you pick it up. It's in the back, and you'll be able to check it out. But that's what the 2020 election reminded me of. It reminded me a lot of the battered woman who goes back to the abusive husband, all because he gives her a box of candy and a dozen roses. And that's what it looked like to me, because when I look at the empty symbolism of Kamala Harris being picked as the vice president and Joe Biden talking about, oh, he's got this Lift Every Voice program, I see it as the exact same thing as the husband who beats up his wife, coming here with some empty gestures and then talking about how he's going to change. But at the end of the day, all you're doing is getting ready to go back to business as usual. And what's really troubling to me is how Black people are so eager to go back to business as usual. And that shows me how deeply damaged the minds of a lot of Black people out here truly are, that so many were so eager to go back to the business as usual instead of trying to stay on the road to change. Now, the road to change is a very rough road. The road to change is a very painful road because I was on it when I was a teenager. And you are going to go through a lot of pain on that road to change because people are not going to want to see you take those steps to move forward because they depend on you, they need you, and they need you so that they can feel a certain way about themselves. And in codependent relationships, the abuser needs the victim in order to feel less than so that he can feel like he has a higher value. And that's something that many Black Americans don't understand about the white supremacist is they need the Black person to be at the bottom so that they can feel like they have some sort of value and some sort of worth. So they need Black people to come in and support their processes and their systems so they can have their smooth world because they know as long as the Black person is participating in supporting their abuse, they can still go on with the lie of saying that they are important and they have value. And that is the crux of the codependency that is the foundation of white supremacy's relationship with the foundational Black American or the ADOS Black American. The foundation of that codependency is the fact that the white supremacist believes the lie that he is superior. And what he needs to do is find a victim who will buy into his lie that he is superior and then continue to abuse that individual and try to convince him in his mind that as long as he is the number one, he's the only person who can meet his needs. He's the only person who can care for him, and he's the only person who will see his value. So he needs Black people to buy into that in order to keep the relationship going. And sadly, we had Black people who immediately ran back to that codependency because they wanted to go back to that cycle of abuse, believing that this is going to be growth and that this is going to be better. But it's not better. It's just you getting back on the hamster wheel and going back to the vicious cycle of how where things just keep repeating itself and you never get to actual change because you're too afraid to deal with actual pain and actual growth. And some people, they really don't want to deal with that process because it's a very long, hard process. And some people don't want to deal with that process because they don't want to take that examination of self. And taking that examination of self is a very hard thing for some Black people to do. It means really looking at who you are, what direction you want to take your life in, and what goals you want to set for yourself. And a lot of Black people don't want to do that. And then there are even more who just don't want that responsibility because in a codependent relationship, the abuser oftentimes tries to take responsibility for everything in a person's life. And that's what happens to the battered wife. The abuser, they will control the bills, they will control the time you get up, they will control the things that you do, they will control everything. And a lot of people taking that responsibility is very overwhelming for them. It's a lot for them. And the codependent battered wife, they need that person to tell them these things. And in the Black community, we see this a lot. You know, Black folks, they need that white man to tell them what to do. And they need this white man to be over them in order for them to feel responsible and be able to do things. They're insecure in themselves and they need this white man to be the face of authority. And that was another reason why a lot of Black people, I think, went and ran and voted for Joe Biden is because they have that need of this white man to be in this position of power over them. And they're not, it's like a subconscious thing. They're thinking, oh, as long as this white man is here, I can feel secure. And they don't understand that you don't need a white man to make you secure. Again, you have the most high living God right here, and he can provide for your needs, and he is supposed to be our main source. And God is not a man, and he's definitely not a white man if you have read your Bible. But many black people, they deify white people. And that was another troubling aspect of the 2020 election, seeing all those people hooping, hollering, and celebrating Joe Biden. It was basically like you were making this man into a god. And that was one of the most troubling aspects for me, watching all of these black people having a celebration in the streets. They were violating the first commandment of the Old Testament, which says, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." And the first commandment of Jesus, which says, "Love the Lord with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength," by deifying this Joe Biden. And to me, they don't see the blasphemy they have participated in by their actions, and they don't see how their actions show who their God truly is. I mean, when I looked at those actions, again, it showed me not only the codependency that many blacks have on white supremacy, but also how they have made this white man into a god, and how they have turned this white man into a god, and how they are basically were worshiping this man and believing in some ways he's going to be like Jesus coming down from the heavens to save black people. So when I saw those type of actions, it shows me we have a very long way to go as a people, and we have a very long way to go as a race, because when you have people going out here participating in blasphemous actions like idolatry, worshiping a white man, that really shows how deeply the mental health issues go in the black community. I mean, people basically turn this man into a god, and they're not looking at him as what he truly is supposed to be, an elected official who is going to be working in the executive branch of the United States government. He is a political official. He is not a god. And this is the same mistake black people made with Barack Obama in 2008, deifying him. And then when the God forsook them, they became disillusioned, because you put your trust in a man. And when you put your trust in that man, and then he disappointed you, because that's what men do, because men are flawed creatures who are born in sin, then people got disillusioned about him, because this man was never loyal to black people. He was basically loyal to his handlers, and he only wanted to use his blackness in order to ensure that he would get the black vote. And many black people didn't understand that about Obama, and they didn't understand that about Joe Biden. And they had an opportunity to show were getting ready to break away from this whole codependent cycle after listening again to all of the black empowerment channels like Professor Black Truth and Jason Black. I mean, they had this drilled in their head repeatedly: no tangibles, no black vote, no black agenda, no black vote. But you still had, again, 80% of black men and 87% of black women go out here and vote for a candidate who never promised them any tangibles, and never had any interest in providing them any tangibles or making them a priority, even though our people built this country and our people were the ones who came here before everybody else. Instead, we get them voting for a candidate who is going to put alphabet individuals and Latinos up first and make black people dead last, even though black people came out in large numbers to vote for this president. That's what's quite troubling, because it shows that, again, the codependent individuals still believing oh, if I still continue to support this abusive person, they'll do something for me. But that's not how it works in a healthy relationship. In an abusive relationship, a person will sit there and continue to take the abuse, hoping, wishing, and praying that one day this individual, excuse me, will eventually see their value, but that person never sees their value because codependent people don't, abusers don't see people's value. Abusive people see people as tools they can use, and they use them as tools to advance themselves towards getting with the people they want to get with. And this is the big problem that most Black people have out here. They're thinking that, oh, if I continue to support this abusive person and this abusive political process, I will eventually get something. But at the end of the day, you're just going to get a big bag of nothing. And that big bag of nothing is because you don't value you, and the person who you're trying to get the attention of doesn't value you as well. So you're sitting there thinking, if I creating this covert contract thinking, if I do this, eventually they'll see me as valuable. But the way you get to see value is by taking your own power. And sadly, Black people aren't at that point yet. And I don't think we're going to be at that point for a good long time because these mental health issues have to be dealt with in our community. And we have to start really working on breaking this codependent pattern of behavior because the way I saw people acting, I mean, this just showed me, I mean, just how deep the damage mentally is with people when, again, you have 80% of Black men and 87% of Black women participating in an election of a candidate who has over 47 years expressed contempt for Black people, and they're still in the process when the greatest impact you could have would be to just stay home because you don't have a dog in this race and you don't have anything being presented to you in this race because they're not offering you any sort of tangibles at all. Neither candidate was offering you anything at all. So why are you even getting out here to go to the polls for a man who made an ad with strippers in it telling Black men to get their booties to the poll? I mean, that's a critical question I have to ask, you know, is why are you going out there to help support somebody who disrespects you? But when you understand mental health, you understand that people who have severe low self-esteem, severe low self-worth, and severe self-hate issues, they're going to go out here and continue to support abusers because their whole culture is nothing but abuse. And in the Black America, we have learned the culture of abuse as a lifestyle. And we believe that being abused is perfectly fine. And that's really troubling because we never really understood what the concept of love was as Jesus Christ has presented it, because we have never experienced that. And all we know is the whole codependent framework that white supremacy has modeled for us for over 400, 500 years. And we're thinking that this is supposed to be love, but that's not love. True love is walking away from the whole codependent paradigm. That's something that I believe Jason Black, Professor Black Truth, and many others have been trying to get Black people to understand with these tough love type videos. They've been trying to get Black people to understand, you know, the way you break free of a system is starts with the mind, and you start to learn your value. And once you learn your value, you walk away from these individuals. Because what I saw over the last couple of months is people playing to Black people's emotions because Black people are very emotional. And because they are so caught up in their emotions, they're not thinking, hey, this political process is a business transaction for these whites, for these other ethnic groups, and for every other group out here. we need to make it a business transaction too. But instead, when you're codependent and all you seek is the validation and approval of an imaginary white daddy, you start thinking, oh, this is about a chance for me to get attention from the white daddy and the white people around me and see them and a chance to get them to see my value. And this is a big problem with a lot of codependent black folks is they don't see the political process as a business transaction. They see it as an opportunity to find value with white daddy, the imaginary white daddy in their minds. They don't see it as an opportunity to empower themselves as a people. They see it as an opportunity to gain acceptance from people in the white social class and elevate their position in the white social class. They don't really see it as an opportunity to get tangible resources from the government that they pay taxes to, or be able to further get higher quality services for the taxes they pay into the system. And they don't see it as an opportunity to elect candidates who will represent their interests. No, they see it as a chance to get their emotional needs met by a political system. And again, a political system is not about getting your emotional needs met. It is about allocating economic resources from the government economic system to be able to provide for the needs of taxpayers. And unfortunately, many Black Americans have not figured this whole process out because they're still dealing with a lot of psychological issues as related to the codependent relationship they have had with these white supremacists. And they cannot separate the white supremacists from the governmental system they created. So many of these Black Americans, they're still not really dealing with these mental health issues because mental health is a taboo in the Black community because many Black people, they believe all you need is Jesus and Oprah. And yes, you do need the most high living God, but you also have to understand the psychological effects of 400 years of slavery and 50 and 100 years of over 100 years of Jim Crow and over 50 years in the welfare state. This mental conditioning has created a culture of codependency that has been passed down from generation to generation. And this codependency, what it does is it makes it where nobody really grows, nobody really changes, and we wind up getting stuck in a vicious cycle that has stagnated the country and prevented the country from growing and actualizing its potential as one of the greatest nations in the world. Because this whole racial issue, this codependency, what it's doing is not only affecting Black people, it's affecting white people as well. Because if you're spending your time and energy out of your life trying to go after Black people, then you're not focusing on actualizing your potential as a white person because you're so caught up in your emotions about having this imaginary power over this Black person instead of trying to think about competing against that Black person. And if you're a Black person and you're always worried about a white person and not ever trying to take yourself to the next level out of fear of upsetting some white person, then you're not actualizing your potential as well. And what you're doing is both of you are getting into the situation where you're never taking real power. You're just going back and forth with each other, and you keep holding each other back and keep each other from ever achieving or accomplishing something significant at all. So codependency, it drags both people down, both the victim and the abuser, because the victim never actualizes their potential and the abuser never actualizes their potential because both keep looking out for each other. And instead of them looking to build themselves up, and actualize their own potential, and they never really come to a point of real competition, because in competition each man wants to be the very best he can be. But weak people, they don't want to be the best, they just want to blame somebody else. And that's what codependent people do. Whenever they have a failure, they go out here and blame the other person instead of going out here, taking a critical examination of their actions, and then regrouping and coming up with another plan towards achieving whatever goal they want to achieve. So that's a big problem with a lot of codependent people. And a lot of the racists, their codependency makes it where they want to keep blaming black people for all their problems, but they never want to look at themselves and say, hey, this is something I did. I didn't put the effort I wanted to put into it, but it's not all black people's fault. There has to be something I did. And this is what codependent people do. And when I looked at black folks out here, it was again the abuser again going back because they didn't want to take that responsibility. I mean, the Trump presidency provided a great opportunity for black people out here, because a lot of black people, they were forced to get their mind into a place where they could not go out here and depend on somebody, on the government or somebody else to take responsibility for their lives. So they had to go out here and say, look, we know in their minds they were saying, oh, Donald Trump is a racist. He's not going to give me anything. So I have to go out here and do for myself. And I'm not a Donald Trump supporter, but I can see the positives of Donald Trump on black people, because black people were starting to break out of that whole codependent frame of thinking that they had regarding the government, and the whole codependent mindset they had regarding getting their needs met from the government. So that was one of the positives of a Trump presidency. And I don't even like the guy. I never thought he was qualified to be president, but it got black people in a frame of thinking where they said, we can't rely on anybody but us. And it made them really start to think about how they were supposed to get their needs met from the government. They started to understand that it was a business transaction. They started to understand that you don't deal with the government looking for a handout. You don't go looking to beg. You go in demand for tangibles. And oh, glad to see you here, Organic. Cool to see you here. I mean, that's a major surprise. I mean, I get a lot of guys, this surprise, Organic, Ringo, people, a lot of top YouTubers watch my streams and my videos. So, but I'm going to get back to it. But you have black people, you know, they're not really understanding that this is a business transaction. And they were coming out of that in the Trump presidency. They were really starting to think differently. But what we saw with this whole Biden thing was they took all of that 4 years of thinking and just threw it out the window to go back to codependency. And that's what made me shake my head, because I saw black people, you know, really making progress, but then they were quick to throw that progress away to go back to being on there on the plantation, hooping and hollering over white zaddy. And that was really sad. Even sadder than that, which was hilarious to me, was Black Lives Matter, and how they practically made a fool out of themselves. You know, they wrote a letter to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, congratulating her for the presidency and Joe Biden for the presidency, and then they're going to ask for tangibles. And I laughed at that in that video, and I made that whole Joker gag because it was just so silly what they did. Because you're going to come from that position of weakness, sending this man a letter and talking about, now I want something in exchange for my vote. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of in my life. I mean, it comes from a complete position of weakness. You've already voted for this man. He doesn't have to give you anything now because you gave him the vote already. And that's not how the political process works. I mean, the political process works like this. I mean, everybody knows this is why people pay $1,000 for a plate to go to these dinners with these politicians, They go there because they want to get the ear of that candidate, and they can make their requests of, they can make their demands of that candidate before they're elected. And other groups, they go as a group and they make demands of this politician before they get elected. And in the best cases, they pick their own candidate and they send their own candidate with their agenda in place. It's not like what Black Lives Matter was doing, talking about, oh, we're sending you a letter asking you to work with us on an agenda. That was ridiculous, because if you ask them to work with you on an agenda, they could give you anything they want and you'll get absolutely nothing that you ask for. So you're sending them this passive letter, which is again position of weakness because you're not face to face with this individual, and then you're going to ask them to help you make an agenda. Again, these people listen to new black media talking points, and then they try to jump up and ahead of people in new black media, and they just fall disastrously, like Black Lives Matter fell disastrously, because after you gave the man your vote, he doesn't have to do anything for you. You get your tangibles by withholding your vote, by saying, look, we are a voting bloc of 20 million, a voting bloc of 30 million. If you want to get my vote and the votes of my bloc, you're going to have to support our agenda. And these are the points on our agenda. That's what any smart group does. But your Black Lives Matter, what was really sad is they had the numbers during the days of the George Floyd riots, and they could have easily presented their agenda then when they were tearing up all of these cities all across the country. That was the position of leverage that they had at the time, but they squandered that leverage by going out here and voting for a candidate without that agenda. And what was really sad is now they want to talk about agenda. I'm sorry, but you had the leverage back during the George Floyd riots and you fumbled the football because you put on your website you wanted to go out here and talk about welfare states and single motherhood. And that's not that was the time for you to put your agenda in the face of that candidate. I mean, here you have cities in crisis, and you have an opportunity to practically, these companies were cowing and falling and making all sorts of symbolic gestures for change. And you practically dropped the football by just letting them take control over everything. But that ability, that willingness to let them take control again comes from that codependency that black people have. Because a person who has a rational mind, they're going to understand, look, I'm going to take that. I see all these people out here. This is my opportunity to present my agenda when I've got the most attention. But they instead let things pass and then let the companies go out here, make these symbolic gestures, and then let the politicians make these symbolic gestures. And they wound up losing at the end of the day. So a lot of black people, in Black Lives Matter, they thought, oh, we're going to go out here and march and protest. But they didn't understand that when you go out here and march and protest and you go out here with no direction, no agenda, and no platform on a platform, other people will hijack your platform. And that's what happened to Black Lives Matter. And people they're looking at them now and going, hey, you're going to send me a letter after all this and talk about an agenda? No, the time to talk about agenda was when you had all those people in the streets out there marching and protesting. That was the time to talk about agenda. And sadly, they blew that opportunity. And the reason why they blew that opportunity is primarily because they didn't have their mind in the right place. And when you have black folks who don't have their mind in the right place, what they do is think that they're doing things that are accomplishments, but they are empty symbolic gestures. For example, a lot of black people went out here and they wanted to vote for Kamala Harris, thinking that, oh, we're electing the first black female vice president. But that was an empty symbolic gesture made to make you feel good, and feel like you're going to get white acceptance. And that's what that was all about. And again, it ties right back to that codependency that Black people have with white supremacy. They wanted that feeling of white acceptance, and they felt because this Jamaican Indian, whatever she is, had some Black ancestry in her, they could create a covert contract where they could get some white acceptance from the establishment. So that's why a lot of Black women were out here talking about Kamala Harris and making her an honorary Black woman, is because they wanted to create this covert contract where if we acknowledge this biracial woman as Black, then maybe the white supremacist system will acknowledge us in some way, shape, or form. Unfortunately, this covert contract was not anything that Joe Biden knows about, possibly, or Kamala Harris knows about. And that's what's going to lead to a major disappointment for a lot of Black women who bought into that covert contract, because unless you directly are making demands with your own agenda for tangibles, those people, they don't really care. And what they're going to do, again, is just use your low self-esteem and your low self-worth as a reason to get your vote, and then give you absolutely nothing in exchange for it. And unless you get your mind right, you won't be aware of these psychological tricks that are being played on you. And these psychological tricks, these are the things that really they can mess with they will mess with your head and have you supporting people who do not support you. And that's what codependent people like to do. Is the abuser, he loves to play psychological mind games on people, like the abuser, he wants the white supremacy, he likes to play mind games on Black people, making them believe, oh, you'll get some social acceptance, and if you do this, and then they'll give you the same amount of nothing at the end of the day. It's like what I wrote in my novel Spellbound. You know, a lot of Black people, they get spellbound because they want to fit into that Black box that's acceptable to white people, and they want to be accepted by white people so badly that what they start doing is making serious compromises, as related to themselves and their character. And I wrote about that in the novel Spellbound. You can check it out. And they get spellbound, and what happens is they want to be accepted so badly, they start trying to fit themselves into roles and into stereotypes, and they do these things because they want to be accepted. And I saw that with the 2020 election. Thank you for the Mogul Maze for the Cash App. Really appreciate it. If you want to donate to the Cash App, I would appreciate that as well. And if you want to drop a super chat, you can drop a super chat as well. But excuse me, I have a cold, but I'm still doing. But they want to be accepted so badly, they're willing to sacrifice things that have higher value. And this is a big problem with a lot of Black people, is that they want that white acceptance so bad, they will sacrifice tremendous intangibles like their dignity, their self-respect, and even their freedom, because they value white acceptance more than anything. And for some people, from what I saw from the people practically praising Joe Biden like he was Jesus, they think that it has a higher value than God's gift of salvation. I mean, they think a pat on the head from a white man, it has a higher value than Jesus giving them the gift of salvation and entry into heaven, because for them, heaven is this white man saying that they have some sort of value. I mean, that's really scary to me. I mean, what I saw, in the streets, I mean, when I saw all that celebrating, I asked myself, what are you celebrating? Because you voted for someone who never really made you a priority. You voted for someone who never offered you, who put you dead last. And you voted for someone who has made other people a priority before you. And you voted for someone who basically has disrespected, especially Black men. When I looked about the 80% of Black men, I mean, that booty to the pole that should have been a reason for 90% of black men staying home. I mean, you should have stayed home on that one because that's a direct insult to you. And I look at that and I found that to be quite troubling to me. You had all these black men going out here. You get slapped in the face with that booty to the poll ad, and you go to the poll and vote for this man, and you sit there and think that that's okay. But again, me understanding the codependent issues that black people have, I understood why they were out here celebrating and praising this white man like a god, because they believed that white Jesus was going to come down from heaven and save them. He was going to pull black America up. And what they didn't understand is you were getting back again on the hamster wheel, getting back on the road to insanity, because the definition of insanity is doing the exact same thing and expecting a different result. And a vote for Biden, as I saw it, was a vote for Barack Obama, and it was a vote for the same policies as Barack Obama, the same hope and change that you didn't get in 2008 and 2012, and going back to that same no hope and no change in 2020. But unfortunately, when you're codependent, you will go back to the abuser who comes at you with the $5 box of Russell Stover candies and the $3 Mexican roses and think you're going to get change. But when he gets you back home, he gives you a pimp hand and tells you that that things are going back to the way they were, and you'll just accept it. It's sort of like what I saw in the Batman episode Mad Love with Joker and Harley Quinn. That's another codependent relationship. And when I look at that, I look at the black community, and it's just like watching Joker and Harley Quinn have their relationship. The Joker doesn't see a value in Harley Quinn, and he just uses Harley to just get whatever he needs done. And she's just a tool in his obsession with Batman. And that's the way I look at a lot of the black folks who went out here, they were celebrating. They didn't see how they were just a tool who was just being used by one side of white supremacy to attack the other side of white supremacy. But you'll have black folks who think that they're accomplishing something because they're still looking to get their emotional needs met from an imaginary white daddy, and not understanding that you have a father in heaven who wants to give you a greater love than what you will receive from this false Christ who you have created in your own mind. Because this false Christ you have created, this white zaddy, this man has never loved you. He doesn't care for you. He basically is somebody who is, his father is the devil. And you're sitting there thinking, oh, this guy's going to give me something, when he's not going to give you anything at all. And again, that's the covert contract black people who are codependent create in their own minds. They have this idea, oh, if I go out here and I do these things, daddy will eventually love me. But this was never your father to begin with. And this was never a god to begin with. And the only reason why you see him as a god is because of the culture you have learned over 400 years in this country, seeing the slave master being the one who provided for everybody's economic needs, physical needs, and social needs. And this social culture is what I saw on display on last Saturday when I saw all those people celebrating that election. And that wasn't even a ratified and confirmed, election result. That was the media creating that election result. And you had all these people whooping, hollering, and celebrating something that hadn't even been ratified by, the states as related to official election numbers. And they were sitting there talking about this. And I'm sitting there going, how can you sit there and talk about this? And this hasn't even been certified. And again, showing me again the codependent mindset that black people have. I mean, black people who are codependent, what they do is they want to be accepted so badly. And what happens is the white supremacist uses your desperation in order to humiliate you and make you do humiliating things. That's similar to what happens with ghetto gaggers. I mean, black folks want white acceptance so bad they're willing to degrade themselves in that filth, calling itself pornography. And you see the same thing with this election. Black people going out here degrading themselves because they want that acceptance so badly. And they want to fit into these black boxes that are acceptable. And that makes me shake my head because, again, it shows me we have a long way to go as a people. And I thank guys like Professor Black Truth and Jason Black and David Carroll and the Iceman and Organic for coming out, and making videos trying to educate these brothers and sisters out here. I mean, that's helping to go a long way, but we still have to go a long way because the minds of so many black people, they are deeply damaged and messed up. I mean, I watched some of this stuff like comparing Kamala Harris to Rosa Parks, and that made me shake my head because I'm sitting there going, how can somebody who is diametrically opposed to everything Rosa Parks stood for be presented on the same page as Rosa Parks? I mean, I saw a T-shirt showing Kamala Harris in the car with Harriet Tubman and all of these other black women who made sacrifices. And I'm sitting there going, how can you put this woman who was diametrically opposed to everything that these women stood for in the same picture as, these legendary black icons and believe that this is an accomplishment? I mean, what you got was a symbolic gesture with her being made vice president. It was not an accomplishment. And if you really look at it critically, Kamala Harris is basically team white supremacy because Joe Biden is the white overseer and the white master. And Kamala Harris is the enforcer of white supremacy because what happens is that your white man in modern day America, what he does is he uses the black woman to be his enforcer in white supremacy. And he'll go out here and send that woman out to go enforce his policies, and so that he won't look like the bad guy. Again, more of the codependent abuse that is applied to black people because they will use the biracial black woman to go out here and create the policy and enforce the policies. And then because a lot of the spellbound black women will see the light-skinned black woman, they will admire her and look up to her, and they'll follow her right along. So this is about, getting into the black woman's mind and making her think, oh, I've got a place in here. But what they're using her to enforce the policies of white supremacy and keeping the black people in line and keeping the black men cowed in line. So that's all that's about. But you can't explain that to many people because they're caught up in the symbolism, but they can't see the bigger picture as related to white supremacy. And they can't see the bigger picture as related to how white supremacy wants to keep black people codependent and it wants to keep them under control. So you'll have black people sitting there thinking, oh, this is a major accomplishment. It's like, no, it's not a major accomplishment. In the game of chess, what they do is you have to be 7 steps ahead of your players. And when you're 7 steps ahead, you can see what these moves are and how this empty symbolism, yes, it makes you feel good, but this is about creating a platform for team white supremacy to continue to further oppress black people, especially your heterosexual black man, because your heterosexual black man is considered public enemy number 1 by both of your president and vice president elect. And most black people, again, they're so caught up in their celebration, they can't see that you've just gone back to the system of white supremacy in full effect, and you're celebrating going back to it. And again, that just shows how deeply damaged the minds of black people are, that you went back to a system and you thought that it was a good thing. But when I think about, again, the battered wife will go back to the abusive husband thinking it's a good thing because she is comfortable with that abuse, she is used to that abuse, and she is relaxed with that abuse. She'll think that that's a positive because she's going back to something familiar, but she doesn't want to go through the pain of being by herself and she doesn't want to take responsibility. And that's one of the things that Donald Trump represented to Black people, um, because the road to greatness is a lot of pain. The road to greatness is a lot of falling down. The road to greatness is a lot of suffering. And the road to growth and success, it's a lot of losing before you win. And a lot of Black people, they just didn't want to go on that road. So they went back to what was familiar. And the whole trauma, as I see it, of the pandemic escalated that. But I believe they would have went back there anyway, because codependent people, they like what's comfortable, they like what's familiar. And I noticed that back, I remember in 2011, when DC Comics decided to reboot with the New 52, you had a lot of people making excuses for DC Comics back then when they rebooted the universe. Whereas an interdependent person, like myself, who's like, I'm just not spending money on that anymore. And these people could try to support this company, even though this company had practically slapped all these comic fans in the face. The interdependent people like myself just said, look, we're just not going to buy it anymore. These codependent people kept making excuses, kept trying to support the product. It's like, no, tell them that we needed to support. It's like, no, if they're not giving me what I want, then I need to leave, because this is a business transaction, and a company's job in an interdependent business transaction is to give me what I want. And a lot of Black people don't understand that the road to empowerment is about you learning how to have an interdependent relationship, because in an interdependent relationship, you understand that you are responsible for yourself, you are responsible for your actions, you are responsible for getting things done for you, and the other person is responsible for the part they're supposed to be responsible for. And when you work together, both of you are working together, understanding that you are responsible for your part. But in a codependent relationship, one person has all the power, and they go out here and abuse other people and take advantage of other people. And they do this believing, oh, this relationship is healthy, but this relationship isn't healthy. In the Black community, we have a codependency problem. And a lot of people are so busy, they're so caught up in being abused that they think abuse is good, but abuse is never good. Abuse is where you're just sitting there wanting to, take these apology gifts. That's what things are as related to the last, I say, 150 years, with things like, oh, emancipation, the freedom, which was the freedom for Black people. That was an apology. That was actually Lincoln just wanted to preserve the Union, and that's the only reason why he did that. But they give you things just as apologies, but they never really want to acknowledge the value of Black people and see a value in Black people. It's always some part of the codependent relationship. I'll give you an apology gift, because that's what battered wives get. He'll buy her a fur coat, he'll buy her a necklace after he beats her up, and then he'll say he's sorry. And Black people, sadly, are looking for the apology gift, but you never get the apology gift. All you get is another punch in the face. And you think getting punches in the face are love, but punches in the face are expressions of disrespect. And what's sad is people just can't see the disrespect, yet they still go out and vote for a man who, again, created policies against Black people. But you had Black people coming out in the largest numbers. And the reason why they were coming out in the largest numbers is because they were looking for love from a white man, but they weren't looking for tangibles from the government that they are citizens of. So when I look at that again shows me we have, again, a long way to go. I mean, that's why I said Ice Cube, he was coming out here way too soon with that contract with Black America, because Black America, we need to get our mind right. And this is a marathon, not a sprint. We have a long way to go, because Black folks' minds are completely messed up at this point. And we haven't even cracked the surface as related to dealing with these psychological issues. Because again, when you have 87% of Black women and 80% of Black men voting in an election where there was nothing of value in it for them, it shows how deeply damaged the psyche of Black America is. And we have to heal that psyche first within ourselves before we start really tackling this race issue in the country. So when I look at it that way, it's like we have a long, long way to go as a people because these psychological self-hate issues, this codependency that white America and Black America have on each other, these are things that we have not even started to even talk about as related to race because we're not even looking at race from a mental health aspect. I've been looking at it from a mental health aspect since 2012. And with the mental health aspect of race, it runs deep because I find, again, quite troubling. You're sitting there celebrating a man who has practically disrespected you at every turn and is also talking about bringing in 500,000 Indians to replace you. And you're sitting there celebrating this man like he's the second coming of Jesus. I mean, people acting like they got the Holy Ghost in some of these videos I've seen. I mean, people out in the streets acting like, manna is coming down from heaven. I mean, that was the saddest thing I ever saw because it showed me again who the God of Black America is. And the God of Black America is not the same most high living God that is in the Bible. No, the God of Black America is like when I talked about my first novel, ISIS. The God of Black America is the white man. And sadly, they were quick to go back to God, their false God, instead of trusting in the living God during the days of the Trump presidency. And again, I'm no Donald Trump supporter, but I can see how indirectly Black people were starting to get right. But now I see how Black people are getting ready to get back to getting lost. And even scarier for me is how a lot of these Black people don't also see how white supremacy is getting ready to try to restart the gender war. Because when I look at that lady Pam on Twitter who was trying to talk about Black men, and then you have women like your Kerry Washingtons and many others. They're trying to start the gender war once again. And most Black folks, because again, they don't have that chess thinking mindset, they can't see how they're trying to restart this gender war and have Black people fighting each other. And I talked about this in my book, Why 70% of Black Women Are Single. I talked about how, the greatest, how they wanted to keep this gender war going because war is a business, and you can get that book on Amazon too. I put the link to it in the chat. But war is a business, and the way they make money off Black people is they create a divide between Black people. Then they sell one side guns and butter, the other side guns and butter. And as you're fighting each other, they make a profit at your expense. And that's what I see starting up when I see these tweets on Twitter talking about Black men are stupid, Black women are stupid. This is about restarting the gender war and getting Black men and Black women to fight each other. And I find it very interesting that we get a restart of the gender war with this president of a certain political party, but we don't, during the Trump years, we didn't see anybody trying to start the gender war once more. So I found that to be, really quite interesting. I'm going to talk about it in depth in another video. But when I looked at that, I said, Black folks, they're so caught up, again, in their feelings about acceptance. They can't see how the abuser is abusing them and how the abuser is going out here. And after he gets your vote, then starts to lay the foundation for having you start to fight each other. Because when you look at these posts on social media, they're trying to, after they got their vote from you and are going to give you nothing, they're starting to lay the seeds to trying to start another gender war. And we really need to push back against that, both Black men and Black women, because these shills and these plants, what they want to do is have you fighting each other and then having a good hearty laugh at your expense because this is entertainment for them. And as you're getting views on YouTube and social media for these back and forths, they're profiting at your expense and watching Black people tear each other down. And that's something Black people really need to think about, and that's related to what's going on, because it shows how the abuser is pulling the strings on Black people, how the puppet master is behind the scenes. Yeah, he knows that you are emotionally needy. He knows you're emotionally insecure, and you want this white acceptance so bad that you're willing to do anything to get it. And that's one of the, again, that runs against Black empowerment, because taking power means you're not seeking acceptance from somebody else. You're not seeking validation from somebody else. You're not seeking approval of somebody else. You are secure in yourself, and that makes many of these racist and white supremacists insecure, because they're insecure because they know their whole platform is a lie. They know everything on their platform is a lie, and they need Black people to be hooked up to them emotionally so that they can feel a sense of value, feel a sense of worth, and they need you to buy into them. And that's how codependency works, because again, they need you to buy into their lie, and they're addicted to their lie because they are in denial about reality, and they need you to buy into that lie, so they'll beat you into believing their lie. And that's how we get, again, the codependent relationship between Black people and these white supremacists. Not white people, but white supremacists, because the white supremacist needs you to be codependent on him, because he cannot function without you. And that's the worst thing about Black people, is they think they can't function without you, but you can function without them. And that's something that scares a lot of Black people out here. So that's what has them terrified. That's what has a lot of Black people terrified, but they don't want you to ever come to that point where you think you don't really need them, because as long as you've got the Most High living God, that's all you need in this world. But the white supremacist wants to be the God of Black people's world, and he wants you to believe that you need him, and that's why it was really sad to see all those Black people come out and vote in an election where they had no dog in the race and nothing of real value being presented to them. That was really sad, because you were still thinking that there was something in this for you. Though this Donald Trump is so evil, Donald Trump is the bad guy. And yeah, Donald Trump was a bad guy. He was bad for white supremacy because he showed that the truth about white supremacy. He showed you that, you would have to take responsibility for yourself. I mean, that's bad, because they need you to be codependent on them. So that's why Donald Trump was a bad guy, because he was going to make you take responsibility for yourself. He was going to make you pull off that emotional hose, and he was going to make you start taking those steps towards moving forward. And he was going to make you take a look at yourself and say, I need to deal with my government from a business transaction and not a plantation perspective, because the plantation perspective, what that does is teaches you, oh, I need to depend on the master and seek his acceptance. Whereas when you start thinking of it as a business transaction, you start thinking, hey, this is about, if I put money on the table in terms of taxes, I need to get an exchange of service. And if I go out here and vote for this candidate that I pick, then they need to come back and bring those tax dollars back to me in terms of earmarks and services, tangibles. And we started to have Black people having this conversation. And that's one of the things that was sad. It was, we had all these people run out here and vote and then celebrate, going back to codependency, thinking codependency was change, but it's just going back to the same abuser and thinking that that's fine. And what I wanted to do with this stream was really break down what codependency was, because Black people really need to start having a discussion on codependency. because codependent individuals, what they do is they take they'll listen to information, they'll go in one ear out the other, or they'll take one step forward and then one step back, and they really won't make the connection that helps them take that step towards moving things forward. And the reason why they do that is because they're afraid of change and they're afraid of pain. Those are the two things that a codependent individual is afraid of, is change, and they are afraid of pain. And they want to go back to what's familiar because they want to feel safe. But there comes a point where the abuse becomes so much that either the person dies or the person eventually leaves. And what's really sad for me, that when I look at 2020, is Black people have taken the step not towards leaving the toxic relationship, but they've taken a step back that may lead to many more Black people losing their lives because they're not really thinking about moving themselves forward. So a lot of them don't understand that when you're in a codependent relationship, the only way to break out of that relationship is to walk away. And some people sit there and say, oh, that they have to take time to do this, but you don't have that much time. When you're dealing with a codependent situation, the abuser, they escalate their abuse when they start to see you starting to make more power moves. And when they start to see you making power moves, that's when they start escalating their abuse. And that's one of the things I fear that may come in the next 4 years, is that we may see an escalation of abuse of Black men and oppression of Black men, because you started to see people taking the steps towards breaking out of the codependent relationship, because the abuser now knows that they've lost power and they know that it's possible for them to lose power. And that's got them scared, because if there's nobody there to make them feel like they have value, they have to really take a look at how worthless they truly are. And they have to take a look at how low their self-worth truly is. And that's one of the things the white supremacist does not want to do, is be at that bottom position. He created that position for the Black man and the Black woman to be in, so that he could feel a false sense of security about himself. And he doesn't want to feel that insecurity at all. And he doesn't want to deal with the lie he told himself. He doesn't want to confront that lie. And because he doesn't want to confront that lie, that's when he's going to continue to ratchet up his abuse. And that's something Black people really aren't thinking about. They just thought, oh, we got to get away from the evil Donald Trump. But you don't understand that in a codependent relationship, it's not the abuser. Oftentimes is somebody. He's more dangerous when you're walking away from him than when you're with him. So when you go back to him, that's when he really starts to ramp up his abuse, because he wants to put you in your place and he wants to make you submit. So this is something Black people weren't thinking about. They're hooping, hollering, and celebrating, but they don't understand. They may be wailing and crying because when you deal with an abusive person, just when you start to, again, make those steps to walk away, that's when they really, really start to lose it, because their fears of taking that look at themselves, that's something they don't want to do. And if you really want to have a dialogue on race, you're going to have to deal with all this insecurity that the lie of white supremacy has taught many of these white supremacists and all those who believe in it, because your white supremacy is a religion that sadly is bigger than Jesus in this world in many places. And many people believe in white supremacy more than the Most High living God. And they will fight tooth and nail for that system more than anything in this world. And sadly, we started to see how deep that was, again, with all those Black people in the 2020 election. I mean, basically, people running back to the plantation and celebrating going back to the plantation. That's something that was one of the saddest things for me. But as somebody who studied mental health and written books like The Man Crisis, I understand how deep the codependency goes in the Black mind, and I understand that breaking out of a codependent life paradigm is something very hard to do. And we may have taken again that step back, but I'm hoping that there are enough people who have seen that people taking that step back and are making that step forward that won't look back and won't get discouraged, because you can't get discouraged when you see the codependents going back to the plantation. You have to keep moving forward, because each step forward is a step towards progress, and each step forward is one that's going to help you grow and get to that next level. Because again, the road to tangibles and the road to Black empowerment is a long road, and it's going to be a very rough road, and you're going to see people falling by the wayside on this road, because they're going to be people who are compromised. They're going to be people who are going to get sidetracked, but you have to continue to persevere on that road. And that road is one, again, where you start to see your value, your worth, and those who saw their value, they understood that the political process is about tangibles, and they were the ones who did not vote in this election. And we may see more doing that sooner rather than later, once they finally get the swerve, because that's what happens with abusers. They will swerve you. But this is a long road, and Black people, you have to continue persevering on that road, because breaking out of a codependent paradigm, again, is a long, hard process, but it can be done. And you just have to become aware of that process. And that's one of the things I try to do with this stream, is make you aware of that process, make you aware of that codependency, and help you understand why people were behaving the way they were behaving. Because when you have a person who is abused, they celebrate because they want to get their emotional needs met, and they think that this emotional need that they're getting met is some sort of achievement, but they don't understand that this is not progress. This is you regressing, and the road to growth is something that, again, is hard and long, and you have to have that discipline and resolve to continue hanging in there. I'm going to get ready to wrap up tonight's stream, and I want to thank everybody for coming out to tonight's stream. And I would really appreciate it if you guys would head over to Amazon.com and pick up a copy of Eastern Blast from the Past, or a copy of Eternal Night. These are the two books of the SJS Direct Fall catalog. And Eternal Night right now is the best-selling book of an SJS launch ever. And I want to continue to get those numbers up. So if you guys would pick up a copy of Eternal Night on Amazon.com, I really would appreciate it. So pick up a copy of Eternal Night, I really would appreciate it. Or if you pick up a copy of Blast from the Past, I really would appreciate it. I also have other positive Black books out here that I have produced, published. I have ISIS, the Main Event, Temptation of John Haynes, All About Maryland. I write a lot of positive Black fiction, and I have a lot of great books on Amazon. So if you guys would head over to Amazon and check out some of those books, I would be greatly appreciated. So my books are on Amazon. Left a link in the chat. And if you also want to help me continue to make more videos and live streams, you can donate to the Cash App. That would also be appreciated. Or you can help me, with the Patreon. That would also be appreciated as well. But I want to thank everybody for coming out to tonight's stream. I hope you learned something from tonight's stream. And I'm going to, again, hopefully be back for next week's stream. And I hope you'll be there for next week's stream. Again, thank you all for coming out to tonight's stream. And I hope you learned something, because I want to see people break out of the codependent paradigm with white supremacy and finally take power and control in their own lives. And I want to see you guys grow and become great people. And again, the road to tangibles is about us getting our mind right. And the way if we get our mind right, you can finally overcome white supremacy at the end of the day. Hope you'll be there for next week's stream, and I hope you will be there because I'm hoping to have a great topic for you then.